So here we have Illustrator, and Illustrator is a vector-based program, which means it works with algorithms for its paths to create lines and shapes, and they can be adjusted to any size and format. And so you can make it as large as you want. You can put it on the side of a building. It would never get pixelated, and it's a very clean looking product that it makes. So here we have the new document window, and we're just going to name it points. And under artboards, it's just like if you're an artist and you had 6 canvases, that would be 6 artboards. But you could have them all spread out in front of you and paint on them at the same time. So in this case, we're actually going to do 6 and not too worried about columns and spacing that you can worry about if you want to. We're not going to do letter size. I'm going to do a square, but you are welcome to do any size that you wish. But I'm going to stick with square since that's what I did with my photos of the points. And so I do 6 by 6 inches, and orientation doesn't matter at that side. I don't need a bleed because I'm not going to be doing anything like that. And notice it is CMYK because we're going to print, and it is for high resolution. And this was because it was originally set for print, but now it's at custom. And then I just say OK. And then you can see these are 6 individual artboards. A little confusing in Illustrator is the layers when compared to Photoshop because it builds everything into one layer, but if you go onto the arrow later, you'll see that there are different paths and more layers than it looks like. So starting with the first one, I'm just going to illustrate a point with a point, and so I'm going on the ellipse tool, and then you have 2 options when you're working in Illustrator. You either have the fill or you have the stroke. And you can always tell the stroke because the inside is empty. In this case, I'm actually going to switch these so that the inside is black. And then the stroke, I'm going to choose none, which is the red line. And then all I'm going to do is create a point. So I'm using Alt and Shift because that will make it even, a square, and it'll also start it out from the center. And then if I come up here to the selection tool, I could move it around if I would like to. Okay, but I'm going to try to keep it centered. And you can see here with my smart guides on, it's telling me that I am centered with my artboard. So now working with the Illustrator idea of a path, notice when I click on this, I have a center, but it's really built on a path that goes around. So I'm just going to copy this and bring it out over here, and I'm going to do that by holding down my Alt option. Notice I get a double arrow. So when I click and drag, I actually get a copy of that. And if I hold Shift, I can only move in 45-degree angles. So I'm going to bring this to the center of this artboard, let it go. But then I'm going to reverse so that I only have a black stroke and nothing in the center. We're going with the idea here on closure, which you studied and know that it's where the eye or the mind closes and creates an image, because we always want to fill in the gaps, or anytime we see a mark or a point, think that it has some special meaning. So to do that, I'm going to make the stroke a lot wider. So see here, I have the weight of the stroke and it's in points. This is a variable width profile, and I could change the stroke on a path at any time, and you can create your own. We will go over that more in the future. But for right now, I just want to do uniform, and then under basic, you have other styles too that you could select, but I'm keeping it here. And what I'm going to do instead is come over to the stroke panel. Now if you don't see this, I'm going to go ahead and change this to essentials. We'll work from there. But here's the stroke panel, and when I click on it, it just shows weight. So I'm going to click over here and say show options. And one of those options here is a dashed line. So I'm going to click on dashed line, and you can see it gave me dashes. The weight is back to 1 point, so I'm going to make that a little bit thicker. But I want bigger gaps to emphasize the idea of closure, so I'm going to put, let's try 50. And yep, that gave me a much bigger space, but I'm going to go 75. And then click off of it, and you can see now, even though these are just dashes, the eye sees a circle. So that is illustrating the idea of closure, because I'm going to be defining this in my book, and so we'll use. So you can use whatever example you want to show the idea of closure, but this is just my example, and you can learn the tools that we have here in Illustrator. Continuance is the idea of having the viewer's eye go in a certain direction or bringing attention. And so the trick we're going to use for that is, again, the ellipse tool. The shortcut is L. Okay, but I'm going to take that. And I'm going to start up here, and I'm just going to do a very small point. I need to reverse, just fill it with black and the path empty. And then I'm going to come up here to transform the object. So object transform, and I'm going to come down here to transform each, which gives me all these options. Here. Under scale, I'm going to have it increase so it slowly gets bigger. So I'm going to enter 110, 110, so the scale is evenly growing. And then for the move in the inches, I'm going to put 0.5 for horizontal and 0.5 for vertical. So it's really going to move in this direction. It's going to go over 5 on the horizontal and down 0.5, well, half an inch. So it's going to come out here, and it's also going to grow. And I'm not going to worry about any angle rotation because it's a circle. It won't matter anyways. And then you can also choose the point of which the transformation occurs from, but in this case we're going to go from the center. So from the center it's going to move this distance, but if we change the point of which we're referring to, it would go based on that point there. I could choose preview to see how big of a jump that is. And I'm not going to click OK because all that would do is take that object and transform it to that point. Instead, I'm going to hit copy. So I still maintain my original, and I make a copy of it that has that transformation. Now the neat part is I can come up here and under transform, I could hit transform again. And Illustrator remembers the settings that I just used, so I hit Command D. And I can keep doing that. Command D, 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 Command D. And you can see that now I have this slow growth, and our eyes follow, and we see a progression almost as if it's being animated. Now if I want to move these, if I try to get the move tool or the selection tool here, it would only move this object because it's selected. So what I have to do is click off of that and then click and drag around all of these. You can see they're all selected, and now I can place it within my artboard and show my point here. There's all sorts of varieties of transforming that you can use to try to give the idea of continuance, directing the viewer's attention in a certain direction or composition. But this is the one I have for an example, and you're free to use this one or try something on your own. So over in this box, I'm going to work on similarities. So again, I'm just going to stick with the simplicity of the black point. And what I'm going to do is make a small one, a large one, another small one, and another large one. And then I may take my move tool and move them off into different places. And then in my explanation, I would talk about how similarity, we notice that they all are similar because they're all black, but we tend to think of these two small ones as more similar and the large ones as more similar because we just try to make connections whenever we look at things. So moving on, I'm going to do proximity, and so hit L for my ellipse tool, and what I'm going to do is make 3 small points and then 1 large one. I might move it over somewhere. And now what ends up happening is we look at these 3 as being joined together. Maybe this is the big bully and these are the 3 wimps, but we see them as a group and maybe they can be clever enough to gang up on the bully. But that's just an example of proximity and how we tend to think there's a relationship if objects are closer together. And then I'm going to do alignment. So for alignment, again, the ellipse tool. I'm going to choose 3 sizes, so kind of a small one, medium, and a larger. All right, and then with my move tool, I'm going to move these closer to each other. So I'm going to select all 3 by clicking and dragging over all of them. And then when I do that, notice up here I have an alignment option. And so I'm going to do left alignment, which is on the horizontal. And you can see how that aligned all 3 objects. So we see that alignment when we look at those objects. We think of them almost as being leaned up against a wall. So I'm going to click and drag over the 3 of them, select all 3 of them at the same time, and then I'm going to hold that Option-Alt key again and start to drag them off, and I'm going to go ahead and hold Shift so they go in a straight line. I'm going to bring them over here towards the middle of my box, and then I'm going to align them centered, or horizontal align center. There they are. And then the same thing again, Option-Alt, click and drag, bring them over to the right, and this time I'm going to align them on the right side. Pretty easy, right? So then I also want to work on the vertical alignment. So to make this show, again, I'm going to choose a small, a medium, and a large. Change to my selection tool, which is V. Click and drag on those 3 objects. And this time I'm going to align them vertically along the top. And then I'm going to click and drag a set over. And these I'm going to align vertically along the bottom. And then I'm going to click and drag another set over here. And I'm going to align those along their centers. Okay. And I think actually I'm going to take these 3 and drag them up here. And so now I have these objects all aligned. I might even grab them and shrink them down a little bit so I have more space between them. Okay, that's good enough. So anyhow, if I wanted to make it really clear, I could then come in and I could get the line tool, which is right here, and maybe I would choose a red, but I would actually choose red here, and then click and drag. I can hold Shift to make sure it's straight. And actually, I'm going to make it a red stroke. There we go. So I show the vertical line for which it's aligned. And then again, I'm going to hold the Alt key, and I'm going to put this in the center to show that one. And then I'm going to click and drag this one over to the right to show right alignment. And then I'm going to go back to that line tool with the same settings for the red. I'm just going to click and drag, hold Shift so I have a straight line. Switch to my Move tool, V, Option-Alt, click and drag. Put this in the center. And then hold the Option-Alt and click this down to the bottom. And there we go. So we've now given examples of the different principles of Gestalt theory of design. So we want to save this, and first I'm going to do File, Save, and I'm going to go into the point file, just save it as points, like so. It's in your Dropbox. But now I'm actually going to export them out so that each one of these artboards is its own JPEG, and then it'll make it very easy to place in my InDesign document. So I'm going to go to File, Export. Down here I'm going to choose JPEG, and it's under the point file in my Dropbox. And actually I'm going to click on here where it says Use Artboards, and I want all of them. And then I export. CMYK because it's going to go to print. It's high quality for print, and I say OK. And it progresses. So let's go into our Dropbox and see where those are. And here you can see point 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So we've just illustrated our own book, which was really easy. And that's about it. Let me know if you need any help. You can see here in the Illustrator file, you actually can flip through the different artboards, and later on when we're doing collateral like business cards, letterhead, envelopes, and so forth, that's how you build it in InDesign, or sorry, Illustrator, is by having those different artboards, but you still can work them out and copy a logo from one piece to another, or any kind of graphic or text like addresses onto multiple artboards at once, so you're not opening and closing a bunch of different files. Thank you.